Good morning. As you are no doubt aware, a great deal of unprovoked and unfettered shade has been cast upon our WhatsApp activities by one Julianne Lascalzo Gleason. In an effort to redeem ourselves in her eyes and restore our honor, I have decided to restore an older tradition in the group, and that, of course, as you will recall happily, is the Humdrum video update. Today's Humdrum topic, I think you will find quite appropriate, and I encourage all of you to respond in kind. For today's Humdrum video update, we will be rating 7 types of objects. Of course, you will be happy to know that all of these objects are indeed forks. I have 7 types of forks in my cutlery drawer, possibly more than the average person has, but I can assure you none of these is unique. I have multiples of each of these kinds of forks, and I have a very particular preference as to which forks are preferred when eating. So I'm going to go through each of these from types 1 to 7, from left to right, and I'm going to describe to you why certain forks are good and certain forks are bad. We'll start here with type 1. This type 1 fork, as you can see, straight off the bat, it has a very pleasing design. If I zoom in there, you can see that it's got a lovely beveled edge, which is very pleasing indeed. In terms of weight, not bad. I would rate it as medium in terms of fork weights, medium. Now, very important for a fork, tine length and size. These tines are thin, which I view as relatively good. You don't want them too thin, but these are quite good. In terms of tine length, I would give them a medium. They could be a bit longer, I feel. You'll soon see what good tine length looks like when we get to one of the further types. So that's type 1. Type 1. Very good. Very good. I'm going to rate type 1. Type 1. Very good. We'll move on now to type 2. Now, type 2. Oh dear. Straight away. I didn't even rate this for type 1 because when I picked it up, I didn't notice a problem. But for type 2, there's a balance problem. It's very, very top heavy. The handle is extremely light and the head is extremely heavy. This fork feels like it wants to leap free from one's grasp. It's a rebel. Aside from that, if I take a look at the actual handle itself, we can see it's nothing special. Very thin. Doesn't have a very pleasant feel to it. It's feels like a cheap fork, to be honest. Cheap fork. No beveling, no designs, no nothing. It does have a watermark on it, and by a watermark I obviously mean an engraver's print. The camera won't focus on it very well though, so we'll skip that. Because I generally don't care for this fork anyway, so I don't think whatever the silversmiths that forged it have imprinted could redeem it. They did a bad job. Look at the tines. Frankly, the tines probably are its best feature. They're a good width, not too thin, not too thick. In terms of length, very similar to the previous type 1 fork. They are not too long, not too short. My personal preference is that they could be a little longer, so I'll give them a medium in terms of tine length, but that alone is not enough to redeem type 2 as a whole, and I will give it a rather bad score. Moving on to type 3. Very similar in design to type 2, you might say. Thin, long-handled, short of head, but very different in the feel. It's a much more balanced fork. Clearly, whoever designed type 2, I'm assuming all 7 of these forks were surely smithed in the same forge by the same people, no doubt enthusiasts like us. Clearly the Smiths perfected the previous design with this. A nice simple handle, but not cheap looking like the previous one. You can see it's not got any designs, but it has been shaped. So we can actually see that the stainless steel print is marked here. The silversmiths certainly got that right, and the camera even focused on it, which is yet again another improvement from the previous fork. In terms of the head, we get yet another improvement here. The head for this fork, it has a better curve to it, a better curve than either, I think, of the two previous forks. The previous forks were, they had a standard fork curve. This has a more pleasingly curved curve. Look at that. Amazing. I quite like that. When I picked this fork up, I wasn't even aware that the curve would be this good. Incredible. Moving on then to the tines themselves. You can see they're a little bit thicker than the previous tines. A little bit thicker. But not too thick. I think it's a design decision rather than a functionality decision on the part of the silversmiths. So that's pretty good. Pretty good indeed. So yes, I quite liked that. That was surprising. I didn't think I'd be rating this so highly when I picked it up. Excellent. Okay, moving on to type 4. Now here's a strange looking fork indeed. Look at it. It's got the handle that you immediately draws the eye. It's got the handle design as though it were designed to have a plastic handle or something like that. It's got the design of a plastic handle, but it's a metal forged handle by the silversmiths. Metal forged. So you can see some very fancy designs here. It's been shaped and it's been designed. Some nice things right here down on the pommel of the fork, and up here on the crossguard, the same as well. Very nice indeed. Look at that. Fantastic. In terms of weight, it is possibly, I would say, easily the heaviest of the forks that we've reviewed thus far. Heavier than all three that came before it. So it's got a great balance. It sits in the hand very comfortably. It really lets you know you're holding a fork. In terms of the tines, straight away we can also see standard fork curve, but tine length. Incredible. The longest tines we've seen thus far. They have a standard width, not too thick, not too thin, but the length, they're long. These are long tines. You could really stab a nice chicken nugget or something with this fork. Excellent. Very pleased. Very pleased with that fork. You can even hear that nice clunk when I put it down. Lovely. Lovely. We liked that one now. I'm going to say quite good. The only thing I would say is type 1, if we just jump back there a sec, I preferred type 1's handle design. So, speaking of handle design, type 5 is going to be a shock for all of you. Look at this. Type 5 handle design. This has been etched by an artisan. This isn't a mere rudimentary design like we've seen before. This is a work of art. Look at that. Fantastic. And if I flip it over, we can see that the back is just as, if not more so, designed. The back of a fork. This shows real attention to detail. Clearly these silversmiths really gave attention to this fork. Look at that. Amazing. So, fantastic. I don't think anyone could argue that this is truly the most triumph of a design we've seen so far. If I end the camera up, we can see that the surprising things about this fork do not end with its mere flashy design, because we mentioned the last fork had long tines. This fork blows that fork out of the water. The Type 5 fork has the longest tines of, I think, any fork that we'll be looking at today. Remarkable indeed. Extremely long. You can see it's got a nice solid standard fork curve as well, but the standard curve is highlighted, and I say double downed upon, just by the length of the tines themselves. We can see that there's a bit of perhaps lettuce or something on the back there that my dishwasher didn't get off. These are all fresh from the dishwasher, I should say, folks. Obviously, I wouldn't do a fork review with hand-washed forks or used forks, but clearly I need to look into getting the Powerball up and running on my dishwasher. I currently am suffering with a batch of dishwasher tablets that do not have Powerballs, and I think here now is the exact results of that. This is what happens when you don't have a Powerball, folks. This kind of nonsense, ruining your fork videos. So, I won't take any points off the fork itself for that, though. It's not the fork's fault. When I'm doing a dishwasher tablet review, though, you can bet your barn door we'll be coming back to that topic. Type 5. I'm going to say Type 5. Great! Exclamation mark. Great. Couldn't find any faults with it. If I had to find a fault, I'd say maybe the design was a little bit old-fashioned, but I think in a fork, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Moving on to Type 6. So Type 6 is one of my favorites on the list here. You can see it's very simple. It's got a strange cylindrically forged handle. Cylindrical. No particular designs in per se, but the pleasing cylindrical shape, I think, is what they were going for. Is beauty in simplicity is how I would describe this fork. Because this is all one forged piece, this hilt, it is extremely heavy. Its size does not belay its weight correctly. It really sits in the hand. It's a heavy fork. If we go and take a look at the head, you can see it also has extremely thin tines. Extremely thin. Look at that. The thinnest of the forks we've seen so far. Remarkable indeed, and I quite like them. They're very good. You could certainly stab a piece of broccoli from a stir fry. You could use it to scoop up quite a lot of rice from that same stir fry. Or indeed, I could imagine this fork being used to feed even the most particular eater. If they wanted to stab even a single pea from their plate, this fork would allow them to do so. Excellently thin tines. Possibly one of the narrower fork curves, though. But I think the thin tines save it. Once again, if I zoom in here, you can see there is a little bit of a rust mark there, Don't confuse this with the previous lettuce detritus from the last fork type. This is actually rust, not food material. So I'm not sure if dishwasher tablets can be blamed for rust, or if the fork should take the brunt of the blame there. But certainly this is one of the older forks we have. Oh, there's some more rust there. Look at that on the back of the tine. This is one of the older forks we have, so I'll forgive it a little bit of rust, because I do love the weight, and I do love the design of the hilt. So I'm going to say rather pleasing. Excellent. So only one fork to go, guys, and I've saved certainly not the best for last, but not the worst either. This is a fork you might be familiar with from more humble locations. You can tell it's got a plastic hilt, a battered plastic hilt. Look at that. Scoring from the ages of use this fork has endured. This fork was already in the house when I moved in, I can tell you that much. All of the others I think I brought with me, except for Type 2. That was already in the house as well. I obviously wouldn't take such a cheaply thin and unbalanced fork with me. Now you can see here straight away there is a defect in this fork. The metal head of the fork does not sit perfectly in the plastic handle. I suspect that there might have been an extra piece of plastic or something here to cover up this unsightly connection. It looks like something might have come off over the years. We do see that the fork head is indeed still stainless steel, at least. Obviously, with the handle being plastic, it is quite a light fork. I was going to say unbalanced, but then I actually managed to balance it on one finger, so the fork kind of screwed me over on that observation. So I'll have to give it credit where credit is due. It is obviously well balanced. Going to the fork head itself, actually, not a bad fork head. It's a shame that the head was paired with such an unfortunately banged up plastic handle, because it's got nice long tines, a little thinner than the standard tines, not as thin as the previous fork, of course, but thin enough that I like them. And it's got a nice curvature there, a nice curvature as well. We can see, actually, looking at the curvature, that some of the tines are not perfectly aligned. You can see they're a little bit. Tine number 3 there, and number 4. Yeah, tine number 4 is the villain there. He's out of sync with the others. But this is a very old fork, so I'll forgive tine number 4 for being a little out of place. So yeah, all in all, I have to say, when I picked up this fork, I thought I was going to give it a very bad review, possibly the worst of the lot, but I think its character has redeemed it somewhat. I liked that it surprised me with its balance. I liked that the tines were rather good, even if one of them is slightly out of place. So yes, a surprising character from a cheap, banged up old fork. So I'm going to say character full. Excellent. So obviously, out of all of these forks, we can see quite clearly type 2, rather bad, no redeeming qualities. The rest, I found something good to say, but type 2 must pay the ultimate price. I'm sorry you had to see that, but type 2 simply could not be saved. Good day. Well, there you have it, my friends. 7 wonderful forks. Well, 6 wonderful forks and 1 dud, I think you'll agree. Therefore, your challenge for the remainder of this wonderful weekend is to respond in kind. Open up your own coveted cutlery drawers, draw forth your own forks, and let's find out who has the widest array of forks, who has the best fork overall. Let's compare, contrast, and generally indulge in the delight that is fork enthusiasm.